So I'll first introduce Hrishikesh based on his most important designation, that's as my friend. And then we'll move on to his designation as CEO of Bucket Search / Zolvit as it's now known. I first met Hrishikesh at a college reunion for NLS where we both graduated from in 2017. And when I first met him, you all know how good I am at making friends with older people. So when I met him, I was instantly 7 years senior to me. So when I met him, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, who is this very humble, down-to-earth, nice person who has so much to learn from me and who has so much to learn from. I obviously had a lot to learn from him. In terms of the legal tech space, he's now the CEO of one of the biggest legal tech startups of the country. And he got to learn from me a lot of fashion and other advice in terms of how to dish down gossip, etc. So apart from making a really good friend, I made a very inspiring one too. So now moving on to introducing him as his second most important designation, that is CEO of Bucket Search, which is now known as Zolvit. Hrishikesh is the founder and CEO of Bucket Search / Zolvit, India's largest and among Asia's fastest growing legal technology platforms. During his student years at NLS Bangalore, he had the opportunity to work with an interesting cross-section of practice areas, ranging from personal matters to corporate consulting and policy formulation with people like Arun Jaitley. After graduating, he founded bucketsearch.com with the vision of making legal simple for millions of Indian citizens and businesses. Through a relentless focus on customer satisfaction, Bucket Search today has the honor of serving 65,000 businesses across a lakh plus annual transactions and is one of the largest platforms of its kind in India. Hrishikesh has been also recognized as one of the 30 leading entrepreneurs in Asia, by Forbes magazine in its 30 under 30 list 2017. So welcome Hrishikesh, we're so happy to have you here.
Thanks Ramya for that introduction. It's humbling and nice to be here today. Wishing all of you a very, very happy new year. And let's hope that this year is blessed and happy and joyous for all of us. We have gone through almost 3 difficult years, 2 years of a deadly pandemic and then 1 year getting out of it. So one must hope and pray that the year ahead is fantastic. What I'm going to talk to you about is something that most of us don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. They say that the last person, the fish is the last one to know that it's in water. Right? So as Indian citizens, we have become so used to a substandard legal system and we've become so accustomed to accepting the terrible system that we live and we are forced to live under that we don't even question it now beyond a point. Unlike the political system where you can change your political masters every 5 years, and that's a privilege we enjoy as a democratic country, we don't have that privilege with regard to our legal system. And frankly, I wonder sometimes why that is. If you think about legal itself, legal and compliance and taxation, it's a service which the government is rendering to us as citizens. We pay for it. It doesn't come free. So then the question really is, why are we tolerating it? What is causing all of us to sit so quietly when it takes 20 plus years for a matter to be resolved? Is it that nobody in the world is doing it better? No. Countries like Norway and Finland can resolve a case in 58 days from the time the case is filed before the lowest court of the land to the time it is resolved by the highest court of the land. Now one could argue that they are small countries with tiny population. But which state, which union territory has managed to get that level of efficiency and competence in its legal system? Okay. So the question which today's conversation is going to be as it is conversational. So I'm going to invite all of you to start asking questions throughout the discussion. I don't want it to be a monologue because I know how boring that can be, especially on a topic like this. So I'm going to invite all of you to ask a lot of questions. But if there's one candle that I can light and hope to light in the course of today's discussion, it's this. What is causing us to be where we are today after 75 years of independence? And what should we be imagining as the future of legal tax and compliance in India? So, there are many lawyers in this crowd I can see, but any of the others who have had the fortune or misfortune of going through a court battle, are there any hands in the crowd where you've actually filed a case in court and seen it through? I'd like to see some hands. And any one of you, any one of you can volunteer, what was your experience with that whole process? What stood out in terms of, you had to put 3 keywords to that experience of filing a case and seeing it resolved in court? What were the 3 keywords to that experience?
The judge was very bad.
Okay. Fine. That's subjective, but fine, I'll take that. And what else?
No, my advocate agrees the judge was bad.
Yeah,
So there were 2 people who were subjective.
but what do you think of your advocate then? Was he bad too?
He was good. Okay, that's
So
a
good
side.
advocate, bad judge. What else?
Yeah,
That
that's
was
a
never
side.
heard. There were no judges available.
Sorry, what's that?
No judges were available
So that was delayed.
to hear the case. Yeah,
Okay.
it was a delay.
I have an interesting one. My father filed an execution suit in 1998 and it's still going on.
That's 25 years.
Yeah, but he now blames me because I've taken it over and he says you're a very bad lawyer. So,
Yeah, okay, so you said good advocate, bad judge, judicial delays, what else?
Opposition lawyer keeps postponing the case.
The lawyer keeps delaying the case, so triggered by the system. Okay, what else?
And judges also, without knowing, without understanding the nuances, they just give the stay orders just like that.
Yes,
Even
so-
in Supreme Court it happened. A case in Andhra Club where 2 factions, unconcerned with the whole subject, they went to the court and they stalled the election, and the judge has stopped from declaring the elections.
Yeah.
And it's still going after 4 years.
So delay again.
Delay again, right? So without going into the nuances of that particular case, I think what you sort of distill, if you churn the ocean, what you get as a distilled outcome is that the system isn't working. I think that's the first stance that we need to take as citizens. The system is not working for us as citizens of India. It is broken, right? So once we admit that, and we deserve a working system. So there are 2 things. One, as citizens, we deserve a system that works. And 2, the system today is not working. Right? So when we start with that premise, then we can go deeper. The shocking fact is that most people don't even take that stance. Right? Most Indians have become so accustomed to living in this situation that we don't even question the need to change it. But let's say that we are an enlightened audience today. We accept the fact that it's broken and we accept the need to change it. Right? So then we need to go into what is going to make it change. Right? What is going to help us to break the shackles which the system has kept us under for so many centuries, so many decades, probably a century in 25 years, and take us to the next level as a country. So we cannot be a country aspiring to be first world with a third world legal system. So the first thing that I see as somebody who's worked in this field now for more than 10 years is a lack of information. Right? So what the system today, and that comes to the technology part of today's discussion. Why is technology important in legal and compliance? And what can technology really do for legal and compliance? Now, if you take any other sector which contributes to the GDP the way the legal sector does, the legal industry globally is an $830 billion industry, so it's not small. It's almost a $1 trillion global industry, legal and compliance, including the big 4s here. But $1 trillion is not small, it's almost 1/3 of India's GDP. Right? That's the legal industry globally. Unlike any other industry which is an $800 billion industry, what is shockingly absent in the Indian legal industry is a lack of information. So as a litigant going before a court of law, you will not have access in most cases quickly and effortlessly. I'm not talking about the extremely educated among us who can hire a good lawyer and get information through your interaction with your lawyer. But most of us, especially the people below the average per capita GDP of this country, do not have access to information. And that information is not made available to the public. So I think that's the first thing as a country we have to change, and technology is the only way to do it. The second thing I feel is treating legal services, legal and compliance services as a public good. Now what I mean by that is, if something is a public good, for example rice and wheat and education, right, there is a certain standard which you can start demanding of the public good. A parent can demand, even if it's a public school, a certain quality of education for that child. A parent can demand that, in your case, the judge, in this case the teacher, shows up to class and teaches the kid. Right? Whether it happens or not is something that we are working on as a country, but you can demand it. I don't think most of us feel we can demand that the judge come to court. Okay? We don't feel it's in our right as citizens of India to demand that that man who's being paid by us as citizens appears on time and appears for the entire duration of the time he's supposed to appear for, and delivers on time and delivers efficiently. So the second thing that we need to do as a country desperately and quickly is start looking at legal and compliance as a public good. We deserve quality in this sphere. And when we start questioning, when we look at it as a public good, we start questioning. And when we start questioning, then improvement happens. And the third aspect is measuring. So measuring and accountability. So in this regard, I must give credit to this current dispensation of the center, and also the last 10 years, a lot has actually improved. So there's a national judicial data grid, which many of us may not know of, but it's available. So I'd urge you to go back and look at it. Where you can actually see the progression of cases through courts, and you can see how it's evolving over time. So there is some awareness, at least at a global level, as to which cases are being filed, how many cases are being disposed, and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, on what basis is a judge today being promoted? On what basis is a judge being appointed? On what basis is the system function? Okay. Now, these are all macro questions. We don't have time in the 15 minutes that I have today here to really debate those questions in their entirety. But it goes back to the fact of legal and compliance being a public good. If it is indeed a public good, which it is, then don't we as citizens of India have a right to demand certain standards of efficiency for something which we file? So if we file a case in court, we are entitled to demand that the case gets resolved within a finite amount of time. And for that, the people who don't deliver, and if the Chief Justice of India was the CEO of a public limited company, he would not hold his position. Right? Every Chief Justice of India has comprehensively failed in his task of delivering justice on time. And the same applies to the Chief Justice of High Courts as well. So every judge at different levels in our system has comprehensively failed on the primary metric, which is speed and turnaround time. So if your primary metric itself, the system has comprehensively failed us, they'd be thrown out by any board, right? So we talk about it at Vakil Search often, that if the Chief Justice were elected by a board of directors, right, they would not withstand even one annual general meeting, because all the parameters are so awful that they'll be voted out. So on what basis are we as citizens of India evaluating these people? And when are we going to start questioning? Right, so I hope I've lit some candles in the room. I'm going to take a pause here to invite you guys to ask some questions. Yes?
It's most often said that delayed justice is denied justice.
Yes.
And the very crux of the issue is delay. So are we being delivered justice in our courts at all? And that is question number one. Question number two is, why are the judges being addressed as lordship? What is so laudable about their
So I think that's the second question is a Victorian hangover. Going back to the British, going back to our colonial masters, where the judges, like the House of Lords in England, which still exists, that was the hangover which we carried forward into this country. But that's the smaller problem, right? Call them what you want. But the first question, I'd like you to answer it yourself. You asked me whether justice delayed is justice denied. What do you think?
I think justice has never been served. Whenever it is served, there's a delayed justice, then it's not justice at all.
Correct. So
then, as a developing country or a country which is aspiring to be a 5 trillion economy and above, which way, how are we going to address it? Are we addressing it?
So that question has two parts, right? One question is how are we addressing it? I would say not very well. Can it be addressed? Absolutely, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I'll just take a pause and see if there are any other questions. Yeah.
Is it anything to do with the political or legal is independent in India, like election commission or whatever it is?
I just asked that.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a loaded question too. Please go ahead. No, please go ahead. I'll answer the question in order.
See, I have 2 points or questions. One is when they wanted to amend the CPC and fix specific timelines for cases to be disposed of, all the lawyers all over the country protested. I'm sure Bhaskar also protested. And, and as a result, it got stalled. Right? So how do we overcome that is the first question. The second question is how far do you think artificial intelligence will help the justice delivery process?
Okay. Chat GPT, the in thing today.
Sorry?
Chat GPT, which everyone is talking about.
So I'll answer those questions in order. So first of all, it is on paper at least, it's meant to be completely independent. So there are 3 arms of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary. Judiciary is supposed to be completely independent, like you said, the election commission. It is supposed to have those kind of powers and autonomy. And I would say that compared to many of our neighboring countries, we have done a lot. Our experiment with an independent judiciary has been quite laudable. We have done quite a bit in terms of preserving the autonomy of the institution. So that while a lot needs to be done, on paper and in practice, I think there is a lot that we can congratulate ourselves for as a country for having done that well. Better than maybe say Pakistan, for instance, right? Started off at the same time as us. But to answer your question, the first question, I think you asked about artificial intelligence, I'll come to that last. But the former question was,
You know, the amendments to the CPC.
right. So I saw him smiling, I saw Mr. Bhaskar smiling, but it goes back to that classic Latin maxim, who will guard the guards? So if the judge, jury and executioner is the same person, they're obviously going to give themselves the most lenient sentence and then let themselves off immediately. Right? So we absolutely have to, I don't know who will, because it's us, when I say us, it's us lawyers who have to take that hard stance. But if I was the Prime Minister of India today, hypothetically, what I would immediately do is separate the policy of law from the hands of the lawyers and judges. The policy, we need to take a strategic call as a country that we are going to be first world, and we are going to be first world by such and such date. That's a decision we take. Right? From that place onwards, decisions will follow. So if you are going to be first world, the judiciary has to enable that the process of our GDP growing to 5 trillion, then 15 trillion, then 50 trillion, and so on and so forth. For that, a case must be heard within 60 days, for example. Now we can put numbers to this, but how quickly must a case be heard? That is not something which a judge or lawyer should be allowed to decide. That's not something we are good at. Right? There are experts in process control who can do a phenomenal job at building a process map for the judiciary as an institution. So we should give it to them. Like, how do you think we have built a company like Maruti Udyog in this country? It's a phenomenal example of Indian manufacturing capability. So we have the ability to do this. There are examples where we are doing it. In this case as well, we should take that power out of our own hands, and there should be somebody very enlightened who says, okay, I will agree to this happening. I'll agree to a strategic decision taken at the top, at a policy level, saying this is how our system should function. Obviously, in the day-to-day disposal of judgments, there cannot be any interference. There we cannot compromise. But on the decisions we take as to how fast, how quickly, how speedily, what mechanism it should follow, and their artificial intelligence has a huge role to play. Why?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just had one connected question to
Please.
this. So when you speak about setting a time limit of speedy disposal, for instance, now there is, for instance, under the IBC, technically it says under 14 days you should dispose of this application. But it rarely ever happens. I mean, 14 days is something your application doesn't even come up in court. So like you probably said, the mechanism is something that is never defined, right? They don't talk about what should happen in these 14 days and in what time period.
Absolutely.
Just this 14 days. So in fact, it does take over 2 to 3 years and there is no repercussion. I mean, you say 14 days, but then what are you going to do to the judge? At best, you'll have to go to your next upper court, the next appellate, the next Supreme Court and get a direction saying dispose of within a month. And that's going to take you 4 months. So in terms of repercussions and mechanism, there is zero. They might still probably be speedy time limits. But this is something probably that...
Yeah, so I would say it's at least a start where you say that, okay, 14 days is what the system is going to guarantee you. Whether that 14 days is delivered or not is a process gap which can be fixed. But if we know that, for example, I take the example of Maruti because I just mentioned it, a car has to be produced with less than 6 defects per million. And that's typically the global standard which people subscribe to. Then okay, then it will be 40 defects per million, but I will progressively get to 6 defects per million. Today, except in some cases, if it's a civil matter, for example, there is no policy guideline as a country that if you will get relief within so many months. You can't close your eyes, safe with the knowledge that yes, it will happen within so many months, and that's something which is broken. And if you talk about the process itself, and this is where AI and ML can come in. AI is artificial intelligence follows machine learning, right? But we are not allowing the machines to learn at all. So if you look at all of our any computer system is always garbage in, garbage out. Right? So you feed in garbage, it throws out garbage. So today our entire system of filing cases before court is in prose, like in Shakespearean times. Right? So you write reams and reams of pages, which is not following any pattern. No machine can read that. I mean, they could, but maybe ChatGPT can. But it is still some distance away from it being able to comprehend the various methods which a human mind can put together. So the first thing which I would do, again, if I had the power to do it, would be to say that every matter which is filed before court has to follow a prescribed format. So don't file in free text. You put fields. You select the relief you want from a drop down. Right? What that can do is then if a machine can read 10,000 applications and it can read 10,000 judgments, it will tell the litigant even before he files that you have a 77% chance of failure. Right? That is possible. So what it can do is actually prevent people from even filing cases. Why would I file if I have a 7 out of 10 chance of losing? Then I would in fact go for a settlement. So there are many little things which we can do. We don't actually need to reinvent the wheel here. The technology exists, the technology is available. If we just streamline the way in which cases are filed before court, many people talk about appointing more judges. Right? It's like throwing more fuel into a tank which is leaking. You can do it, and to some extent it will solve part of the problem. Right? You say we have a shortage of judges. I would say we have a shortage of process. We have a shortage of a method to the madness. Currently it's just pure madness. Right? And the method to that madness can, in a big way, reduce what we call. So what we are doing today is applying a linear solution to the problem. We know that judges decide cases. You want to solve more cases, get more judges. Right? But that's not the right way to do it. That's one way to do it. And especially if it's not working for so many years now, we've not been able to hire more judges or appoint more judges. We need to look outside, and the first thing we need to look at, in my opinion, is apply basic principles of machine learning and artificial intelligence to even the filing of cases. And then the litigants, if they know that yes, if I file this case, I have an 80% chance of winning, the other side knows I have an 80% chance of losing, settlements become far more possible. Then we need to make small changes in the process of mediation and conciliation to encourage litigants, clients, to go for that as opposed to filing cases in court. Right? So lots and lots of little things we can do. I'll take a pause here again, see if there are any more questions. Yeah, please.
So when you're saying application of artificial So when you say application of artificial intelligence and trying to help read the files, we have to again begin with objectively filing the case and not just subjective prose that is entered. Has the lawyer community or whoever the community represents sat down and created checklists? Because in research where we are involved, there's a particular checklist against which we need to report our research.
Right.
Because again, research is citing your experience. So it doesn't, when I cite something, it's my experience, but when I cite it against a checklist, similar experiences get, compared. So it's
Correct.
easier to comprehend information from research. So is there something like that for in lawyers community that?
Sadly no. So
Would it be a good initiative if senior lawyers sat down together and say that if you're going to report burglary, these are the items that you need to.
okay, so I think from a tribal knowledge perspective, that to an extent exists. So if you're filing a certain kind of case, then in evidence you have to present certain kinds of evidence. So I think that exists.
Okay. So could that itself be objectivized as a checklist online format? So
Yes.
that you just answered yes, no, then it becomes easier for algorithms to be
Absolutely.
written and learnt, and then this predictive outcome is in place.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's a great point. There's a very nice book actually on this by a man called Atul Gawande. He wrote a book called The Checklist Manifesto.
Yeah.
And the only reason that flying aircraft has become so safe, an aircraft is the safest mode of transport globally today. And the only reason that's happened, it was the least safe in the pioneering days of aviation. And the reason it's happened is because of the checklist. So
Yes,
before
the checklist manifesto is what prompted doctors to follow a checklist to
Exactly.
minimize casualties in operation theatres, and healthcare systems have become far more reliable.
Yeah,
so
so
I
Dr.
think it would be a good thing for lawyers also to adopt something like that.
It absolutely would, and that can be digitized. So there as well, machine learning can absolutely come in. Once you have a checklist and you know that okay, these lines of evidence are not available, the case doesn't even get filed. Right? So you don't even take the time of the court, and the judge doesn't have to come and tell you that this is missing. Right? The system will tell you that it's missing. You don't even go past that the gatekeeper doesn't become the judge. The gatekeeper becomes the system. And I think that when I say that appointing more judges is not the only problem, it's because we have made judges the principal, in fact the only gatekeepers in our system. Right? A gatekeeper could very easily be a computer for a lot of transactional stuff. and it should only go to a judge when it's evolved beyond the gatekeeper. So a checklist is a superb way to do that. Yeah.
What you say is okay in commercial, mercantile type of transactions where the evidence is documentary in nature.
Right.
But as you're aware, commercial matters, mercantile matters constitute a very small proportion of the type of litigation that goes on in the country.
Right.
A lot of civil litigation is dependent on oral evidence. And oral evidence depends on what the witness has to say in the box, which cannot be subject matter of a checklist. Therefore, those kind of matters, I think, are not what you're talking about. Perhaps what you're talking about are documentary evidence, commercial matters, etc. But those are so subjective, and your ability to predict, have a predictive analysis of how the case might turn out ahead of filing the case would be a very risky proposition to decide that I'm not going to file this case because of so and so, because you do not know what your witness, your own witness, who believes in his set of facts, is going to respond to a cross-examination by the other side. So all of these are all variables in your checklist, which you will not be able to decide at the time of filing whether I should file or not. So I think what you say, I see the meaning for certain types of cases like insurance and so kind of stuff, but perhaps not for all types of litigation. I don't know what Shundali thinks.
No, I'll just add one, sorry,
Sure.
one small bit to it. I fully agree with what Bhaskar is saying. And I'd just like to add one more, namely the fact that there are multiple precedents. Unlike other thing, here you have precedents of various courts, sometimes conflicting with each other. So which is to be followed, which is a better view, which is the worst way, I'm not sure if a machine can help. So that's the, otherwise, I agree with you.
Yeah, in fact, I just wanted to mention, these are two lawyers who are educated in the field and they are giving their experiences. As a layman, they say there is a law of the land. But honestly, in this land, as a person who's probably gone to the court, which land are we talking about? If I look at the Societies Act of Tamil Nadu, it's completely different from the Societies Act of Maharashtra. So there is no common parameter where I can put a checklist to. And the second part is, of course, the whole system is built in lacunae, so there are people going around in circles and coming back probably to square one at the end of a couple of appeals or a couple of years also in certain cases. Now coming into where you're coming in is, you're trying to mix science and emotion. Now, the biggest challenge here, as Bhaskar rightly pointed out, is in most of the cases there is an emotion and then there is situational analysis. We have a couple of cases in High Court or in Supreme Court. A Supreme Court judge would have no idea of what a CRZ in ECR would be to a CRZ outside Lake Mansarovar or whatever be the case. So probably in some cases the checklist theory might work. Yeah, it is like how you apply for a visa or a license, or as doctor said, I've got 10,000 cases of a toothache and that's what probable causes of a toothache are or a heart attack are. But again, going back to the same example, we don't know what is the stress for a heart attack also. So, it may work, may not work at times, but of course, living in the utopian world that we all are wishing that someday the legal system and the judiciary gets into a much better position where we can actually think of wishful thinking of 14 days and 2 months and 3 months for an answer. To give you another example, driving in here, at one particular zebra crossing, there was a drunk guy who took 5 minutes to cross the road, held by a policeman. Irrespective of the fact that, okay, there are 20 cars lined up. Now what goes there is the emotional decision of the policeman to help the drunk guy cross the road, irrespective of the fact there are 20 people lined up. So, you're trying to mix up two things, which is, on paper it looks brilliant, but I don't know how far it will work. Probably again, as Bhaskar said, in commercial cases or mercantile cases where there is a history which is on a common platform, again it might work, but thinking ahead it may not. That's this thing. And then the third biggest thing in India is the numbers. I didn't want to place this earlier in the cases. 99% of the time when the lawyer wants you to close the case, he says, sir, go accept that you've done a crime. Like you crossed a road or you cut a signal and be done with it. Rather than go try and fight that, no, there was an orange which I was trying to cross. So, that's how it works. That's my take on it. Thanks.
So So I mean, the premise I don't agree with, right? So we have, when COVID hit us, the same country, let's talk about only Indian examples because let's talk about this country. We were able to become the country to have the fastest ramp up in vaccine production. It was an unknown vaccine, unknown disease, it was all new. But in a matter of a year and a half, our country, our people were able to deliver a vaccine to the remotest corners. The same country that has for decades not been able to solve something as basic as drinking water, for example, but drinking water is diarrhea. Right? More children die in our country of diarrhea than probably anywhere else in the world. So if a country, it's all about will. If you decide that this has to be solved, we'll find a way to.
But will from top to down or down to top? That's the question where your question comes in.
The same thing.
Frankly, that's irrelevant. But let's say from top to down. Right? Top to once we decide that yes, it has to be done, we will find a way to do it. We found a way without having cured diarrhea. We were able to cure COVID because there was a political will. It mattered enough, and we did it. Right?
We are assuming that we solved COVID. We don't know whether the
No,
vaccine
we
is working or not.
we did solve.
We were at least able to
That's a big
control it.
question.
You were at least able to control it. Let's take the example of UPI.
No, let's assume that we did solve COVID. But again, as you rightly said, the will came from top to down. But as President rightly said, does the political will of this country permit this lacunae of the judiciary system itself to be solved is the question. I mean, yeah, wishful thinking, you become the Prime Minister and go ahead with it. But does the political system itself, because again, if you look at most of the litigation cases when it comes to property or land or even commercial cases, there is a political involvement which doesn't want it to be solved in a certain manner.
No, so that's true. That's absolutely true, right? So, but I think the problem is deeper. The problem is that educated people like us are willing to live with it. If educated people like us say, no, this is the public good, I need cases to be resolved within 60 days. I don't care if there are 1 million cases or 100 cases. I don't care if we are a small country or a big country. That's not my problem as a citizen. Do we care how many children there are before we say they need good education? They all need good education. It doesn't matter that you have more kids than probably all of Western Europe. Each child deserves good education. So if we have this self-defeating attitude that no, it can't be done, or it's like you said, emotion mixed with logic or emotion mixed with facts, it doesn't really matter. We decide that it's a public good, it has to be done, then we figure out a way to do it. Until we do that, no Prime Minister is going to come and do anything about it. Because it's not enough of a burning issue for any political master to come and do it.
So you are saying that the best option would be to elect our Chief Justice and the rest of the judicial system as we would the...
I would not make something that drastic as a recommendation
because
here.
otherwise how would you as an independent citizen make? You can apply, you can appeal, but whom do you appeal to?
So I mean that's the reason why some of this hopelessness has set in, right? Because who do you appeal to is the question. So I think it starts with a change in the dialogue itself, a change in acceptance. So we have to move from acceptance to questioning. I think that's where it begins. If you ask me, none of us in this room have individually the power to make all the change ourselves, but we are all today in a state of acceptance. We have to move from acceptance to questioning. And then to answer Mr. Bhaskar's point, I don't agree. Right? I don't agree with that at all. Yes, it's not the same as maybe an insurance case. The machine learning cannot do the same instant magic which you can do in an insurance case. But you can apply amazing process engineering to having even the most complex case resolved much faster. Right? Today technology exists, and let's forget technology for a moment. There's something called asynchronous processes. Right? Why does every recording of evidence of the witness have to happen before the judge between 10 to 4? Right? Why can't it happen between 9 to 7 like a corporate setup? Why can't that recording happen in multiple recording chambers outside of court? And we play to why are we not thinking about process evolution? Why does everything have to happen between 10 to 4? And if at 4:30 court shuts, if it's a Friday, it starts only on a Monday. We have to rethink the process itself. It doesn't have to follow the same process which it has followed for the last 75 years. It has to be different. And if you do that, then something called asynchronous processing happens, where literally thousands of cases which are in different stages of evolution can be processed at the same time. Do you think every car on the line is manufactured bolt by bolt? No, something called just-in-time happens. A wheel appears at the assembly line just as the car is coming to that spot. The equivalent in the legal system is we actually get the rubber and then we make the wheel, and at that time everything else is stopped. That's why it takes so long. if the rest of the assembly line is moving and the wheel comes in at that right moment, right, it will be orders of magnitude faster, it will be 100x faster. It can be with the same legal system, the same system as it exists today, just process re-engineering.
Can I ask this question? Has any of the...
One second, sir. I think he raised his hand before, but I'll come to you in a minute.
No, what is the views of about the archaic laws itself that we have? Some of the laws that we are talking of, whether the Contract Act or the Negotiable Instrument Act or the Evidence Act, are of 1880s and this thing, which is I don't think the British itself are following what any further. Should there be even a sunset clause in all the laws that would say some of them will have to stop and we have to rewrite the laws because they are not relevant in the current context?
You're right, but the lady next to you, I don't know her name, but as she rightly pointed out, that dangerously takes us into that self-spiraling loop where we become helpless. Because yes, the laws need to be changed. Yes, a lot of things have to happen from the top down. But we are not in a. I mean, that will take a lot of wheels to turn. What I want to spark in all of your minds today, before I leave, is that with available technology, with what we today know about how processes can be built, we can make phenomenal changes in our system. We have to move from acceptance to questioning. We have to start questioning. It can be through an article you write. It can be through when you address your friends over a dinner or over a drink. It can be when you meet people socially. The questioning has to start, and that questioning will obviously, and we live in that hope, it will find its way to the top. So yeah.
Yeah, and if we leave aside Scandinavia, which you rightly pointed out is a wrong example in terms of number of people, population and so on. But any of the advanced, fairly populated countries like the US or UK, for instance, how much of AI and ML have they been able to deploy in their legal procedures?
So, not too much AI at the moment, but a lot of machine learning, at least at the grassroots level. So when you file matters in, and the UK's biggest success has been in alternative dispute resolution. So they basically done a lot of process re-engineering to ensure that a lot of cases get resolved outside of court. So it's not necessary that we have to apply AI and ML to everything. We can do it by just process re-engineering. AI needs enormous amounts of data. It needs terabytes and terabytes of data to start doing its magic. Machine learning can start even with 10,000 pages. With 100,000 pages, you can do amazing machine learning. So AI not yet, machine learning yes, and a lot of process re-engineering. I think there was a question in the back.
Speaking as a layperson again, so it appears that a big problem with our judicial system is the lack of repercussions for judges for a bad judgment, a blatantly bad judgment. It appears that a judge can get away with anything. So are there any checks? How does it work in other systems, and how can AI ML help in this area?
No, I think that is the problem. I think the legacy of the system is one of no accountability. It comes from, I think somebody mentioned, why do we call them your lordship? And that to me is not such a big problem, but it's symptomatic of the way we look at it. We call him the prime minister, right? But there's a difference between calling somebody the prime minister and calling someone your lordship. So there is even where the judges sit, it's always elevated. Now it came from a very Victorian notion that the law, Caesar's wife has to be seen to be, the whole notion of elevating somebody to a level where you don't question the authority, right? I'm not saying we should question the judge's authority even today. But what I'm saying is that the metrics on which a judge is promoted have to be made public. That's not happening today. Artificial intelligence is not needed for that. Just publishing the data on this specific judge in how many days on average did he hear and decide a dispute. Just publishing the data and saying, okay, X judge got promoted because he did it in so many days, because he was able to, on average, of course some cases are complex, some cases are simple, on average resolve disputes faster.
Can we reduce the number of adjournments? That is what they are speaking about.
I think somebody mentioned the CPC. There are already limitations on how many adjournments you can seek. So the law there is quite defined. The fact is that it's followed only in breach. Huh? She has a case from, yeah.
That point of 1998 famous. I don't know how many adjournments that I see.
So it's not just the adjournments, right? I think the adjournments is what as people regularly like to blame. It's also that the process is so cumbersome, right? And at many stages you can, if you're a smart lawyer, you can just play with the process, and you can send the matter back to the docs basically, right? So you can find ways, and this is something which, and I don't blame lawyers for it, right? That's what they're meant to do. In a system which is broken, you're obviously doing what you can do for your client, but the process itself has to be, and comes to Mr. Bhaskar's question too, we should not think that there are some cases which fundamentally will take time. Nothing should take time beyond a certain point. We need to decide that, and we need to say, okay, no matter what the matter is, it should be resolved within a year. That firmness of conviction, and that will only happen by us questioning over and over again as citizens. That's my belief.
Don't you think it falls on the part of the lawyer on both sides?
Yeah.
That once a judgment is passed in the lower courts, that they don't take it to the higher courts so that that case gets resolved faster.
Why would
Because
you
that's what you do.
Why
That's
would
what
you do
lawyers
that?
do. They doesn't get resolved in the lower court goes to the high court and then the appellate and then the supreme.
But why?
Husband's a lawyer.
But why?
When you answer that, just remember her husband's a lawyer.
Okay. I figured one of you was.
Not me.
But no, I mean that's not possible, right? Why would I, as a lawyer, why would I not file an appeal? Why my client, first of all,
If your judge is going to be somebody who is capable of giving you the judgment, because as a community he has been made a judge, so why take it to another judge?
So by the time it goes on appeal, Mr. Bhaskar's point doesn't stand anymore, right? Because then by that time the facts are already defined, the inputs are defined, the output is defined, right? By the way, do we have time or do we have to wrap? 5 minutes, okay. So by that point, machine learning can do an amazing job. I wouldn't say we should tell lawyers not to appeal. That's not realistic. If the client is going to suffer a jail sentence, for example, is going to suffer a huge penalty, every client is going to say, let me appeal it, let me see what happens.
So take the Nirbhaya case for example.
Which case?
The Nirbhaya case. It went on
Nirbhaya.
upward.
Nirbhaya, okay.
Yeah, Nirbhaya case.
No,
That
so
would have been closed long back.
again, I think the answer is not to say you can't appeal. The answer is to say the appeal must be disposed of quickly. Ajmal Kasab, right? He was in jail for I don't know how many years. 2008 he was hanged in 2014, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I may be getting the dates wrong, but we had him on CCTV camera with an AK-47 in the middle of our most busy railway station, massacring people.
Yeah.
It took us 6 years. Now that is a process change which we need to implement. The process must evolve quickly so that we don't say you can't file an appeal. You may limit the number of appeals, like you can say, okay, there's one appeal, you can make those changes. But fundamentally, the process has to evolve so that when a ticket, so in the software world we call it a ticket. So when a ticket is going through the funnel, every point of delay for that ticket is nipped in the bud. So we need to look at the process of a case like a ticket and say, if the case is today taking 20 years, what are the points at which that time is being accumulated? And how do we eliminate that time? Right?
In all likelihood, I was saying that you would probably write pretty judicially, make wishful thinking.
Yeah.
In an IPL match, we have 2 appeals and a third umpire looking at the trajectory of the delivery, etc. That's what it comes to if it comes to machine learning.
That's a very good example. I mean, not an exact example, but a very good example, right? So what has happened today is the number of wrongful dismissals in cricket has really reduced, right? Why? Because of the visibility, and because technology has evolved to a place where you can see exactly where that ball would have, what the curvature of the ball was, and simple physics is applied to see, force, mass into acceleration, what curve that ball would have taken had it gone to the stumps. Now, very similar applications can happen even here.
Yeah, but then again, also the false side is also the sledging is reduced because there's a mic right there in the stumps and you can hear what the wicketkeeper has told the batsman.
So, what is the sledging equivalent in the legal system?
Exactly. So, would you also have a mic at the judges' chambers to figure out where the thinking is going?
I mean, I would. If you ask me, the answer is no. I think that a judge is also a citizen and he's entitled to his privacy. So no, the answer is no. But we don't need to go that far. We don't need to eavesdrop on them. We just need to ensure that they are held to certain standards of accountability, that the process enables them. There's no point today telling a judge to rapidly speed up. They'll mess it up, right? Because within the confines of the existing system, if you say make your process 10x faster, everything will fail. Then justice itself will be not served. Right? They'll try to hurry it up for the sake of hurrying it up. We shouldn't do that either. So it has to happen together. We need to set standards. We need to say, okay, this is a public good. We need to demand certain rules and standards as citizens, and then we need to totally relook at the process using, to the extent required, AI and ML.
Is it necessarily to be brought to the court, given in a very dangerous circumstances? Can't they hear through Zoom or something like that?
It was happening during COVID, for example. Right? So COVID, in fact, opened a lot of eyes to what is possible in one small sphere, which is asynchronous, digital delivery of, for example, examination, cross-examination, witnesses not having to be brought to court. All that happened in COVID. Now we are going back to pre-COVID times, which is good for a variety of reasons, but not good for this reason, right? We should, as a matter of fact, do that.
I think, coming to the point, Yuval Noah Harari is a writer.
Yuval Harari, yeah.
By one of his books, he is telling by 2030, the world lawyers will be going out of dictionary or anything because AI will take over completely, and he has clearly mentioned in one of his books. Whether are you accepting that one?
No, absolutely not. Right? One is I have a vested interest in that not happening.
Okay.
But sorry. No, but I'll tell you what is more concerning. There's this organization called Daksh, which has done some research on out-of-court resolutions of disputes, which is basically what the use of thugs, right, to resolve property disputes. Now that is alarmingly on the rise, especially in Tier 2 and Tier 3 India. Now that is a clear sign that once nature hates a vacuum, right? When there is a void in terms of having an effective justice delivery system, people will look for alternatives. Yeah. And your parties like Shiva Sena, etc., how did they emerge? Yeah. They emerged because of a lack of faith in the systems of public justice delivery. Right? So it's not so much lawyers going out of circulation. I don't think that we will, but it's more the system itself being eroded to a point where it's impossible to redeem itself, and that is the biggest danger. So unless we fix it now, unless we question and start questioning aggressively today, we will come to, or we may come to a place where we have these alternative justice delivery mechanisms which are 100 times worse than the present, because there is no fairness there, and there is no it's terrible in every way, right? For a political organization like the Shiv Sena to become a de facto court is a horrible mockery of the system. So we should avoid that, and for that we need to fix our system fast, whatever the cost.
Okay. My second question is actually in the one more book called Noise. The first chapter itself, they are mentioning about the judgments, how differ for the same type of case.
Yep.
Judgments are going in a different way.
Yep.
So what the Noise, the book, I think Daniel Kahneman, what he is suggesting is actually the most important for anything to go in a right manner is a checklist. What you mentioned in the earlier this one. Are we really going in that path according to our current legal systems? Any process we are evolving in that manner?
No, we are not. So that's called regression analysis, basically what you're talking about, where you see a standard pattern and you see the regression from that mean. You see basically the counts of deviation, and you ensure that your deviation for a standard process is limited. That's basically what every scientific discipline does. We should do it for the legal system as well. We are not doing it today, no.
One last question.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the last question.
Go for it.
So, I have a vested interest in the future of the legal system, and I hope and pray that you will have the kind of system that you guys want for us, especially when you're students. So, in your honest opinion, do you think we have grown well in the last 10-15 years from what it was, say, in the early 1990s. Before, industries have grown differently from then to now. So the way we have approached business has changed. You think in the last 10 years, going forward, we are going to have a kind of system that you all feel India needs?
Very good question. So I would say yes and no. I would say in some places it has been very heartening. For example, the process of setting up a company, which is what Vakil Search does at scale, has really evolved in the last 7-8 years. From 2015 to now, the corruption has virtually become zero. In the process of setting up a company, there is. Process of filing a trademark used to be extremely excruciating before 2015. Now it's much faster. GST as a process, GST registration, because we also help companies set up in other geographies. So we know how a country like Germany, which is famed for its efficiency, right? Setting up a company in India is 100 times better than setting up a company in Germany. When we allow ourselves to be great, we are great as a people. In the process of resolving cases, on the other hand, we are not allowing ourselves to be great. And so am I hopeful? I'm hopeful, yes. But we'll have to see. So yes and no. Compliance, a lot of improvement. The raw dispute resolution in courts, not really.
Thank you so much for enlightening us with so much of legal knowledge. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present a small memento